Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello, and welcome to the Castle of Horror interview segment, where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre worlds from Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the Alex Van Helsing novels. With me this week, we're talking to author Paul Tremblay. Or Tremblay or Tremblay? How do you want to say it?
I take either one.
Okay, Paul Tremblay, hello, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Well, hi, thanks, Jason. I appreciate it.
Oh, excellent. Okay, Paul Tremblay is the author of A Head Full of Ghosts from William Morrow that came out very recently. He's also the author of the novels The Little Sleep from Henry Holt, No Sleep Till Wonderland, and Swallowing a Donkey's Eye from CZP. He is the author of the short story collection In the Meantime. His essays and short fiction have appeared in the LA Times and numerous Year's Best anthologies. He is the co-editor of 4 anthologies, including Creatures, 30 Years of Monster Stories. He is the president of the board of directors for the Shirley Jackson Awards. And that's pretty cool. Lives outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and a master's degree in mathematics, which blows my mind. You can find him online at www.paultremblay.net. Welcome, Paul. Hey, here's what I think would be really cool for people to get a feel for at least one of the voices in this book. The new book is A Head Full of Ghosts, a novel by Paul Tremblay. If you could read for me the entirety, which is just about half a page, the page 13, which is the beginning of chapter 3. It's about 3 paragraphs.
Sure, absolutely. So page 13, this is chapter 3. I tell Rachel that there is no starting point or ground zero for what happened to Marjorie and our family. If there was, the 8-year-old me was not aware of it, and the almost quarter-century-old me cannot find it with the supposedly clear lens of hindsight. Worse, my memories mix up with my nightmares, with extrapolation, with skewed oral histories from my grandparents and aunts and uncles, and with all the urban legends and lies propagated within the media, pop culture, and the near continuous stream of websites, blogs, YouTube channels devoted to the show. And I have to confess to reading way more of the online stuff than I should. So all of it hopelessly jumbles up what I knew and what I know now. In a way, my personal history not being my own, being literally and figuratively haunted by outside forces, is almost as horrible as what actually happened. Almost.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So this character, very briefly, the story in A Head Full of Ghosts, this is in a way your riff on The Exorcist, in a sense. It's about a girl. There are 2 girls at the center of the story, 2 sisters. One is Meredith, who we just heard there as a narrator, and the other is a teenage girl who may or may not be possessed by the devil, and how her family deals with it. And you didn't shy away from the notion that people are going to go, oh, hey, The Exorcist. So can you talk a little bit about how you incorporated all of the literature, such as it is, on this kind of genre, and how you kind of worked them into the story?
Sure. When I first had the idea for the novel, I was actually working on something else, and I was just trying to read things, reading some horror essays or essays on the apocalypse that might have had to do with the novel that I was working on. Anyway, I stumbled on across a book that had a bunch of essays about the movie The Exorcist, and a lot of the essays sort of broke down what was happening politically. There was also interviews with the cast, and there was even a journalistic piece that investigated the supposedly true story that The Exorcist was based on, and pretty much found it to be totally bunk.
Right.
So when I was reading those, it kind of just sort of struck me like, within the last 5 to 10 years, there's been many literary update or literary take of the zombie. Vampires have never really gone away. There's been some recent high-profile werewolf novels as well, and I was like, geez, no one's really, not for a while, done a novel on the possession story or an exorcism. So I asked, how would I do an exorcism story? So I first started with the idea of trying to do a sort of postmodern, secular/skeptical exorcist story. Once I had that sort of framework, I knew that no matter what I did, people would always think of sort of that iconic sort of urtext of The Exorcist. So instead of shying away from it, I just decided, I would totally try to address it and have a conversation with it, and really sort of use it to my advantage, if that makes sense.
Well, and you even have the way the novel works, and this is one of the few novels I've ever read, and I shot through this book in like 3 days. I really enjoyed it and found it extremely readable, very chilling, and it's one of the few I can think of where a character has the opportunity to comment on the novel because you've come up with a conceit where she has the ability to, because your main character, really, who is the observer, Meredith, she has 3 identities. She's the first-person narrator when she's in the role of an 8-year-old. I guess she's an 8-year-old. I think it's 8.
Right.
And then there's the 20-something her who is telling that story and also is in a number of interview sections with somebody who's doing research on this whole possession story a number of years later, 15 or so years later. And then you've also got yet another identity that she takes on, because many sections of the book are blog entries by Meredith in the guise of a TV blogger, basically. She writes blogs about TV, and it turned out that this exorcism had been made into a reality show that was hugely popular, and so she's writing a blog about it. And that gives you the opportunity to comment on the way it's shot and on the way, what's going on. But it also gives you the opportunity to kind of place the whole story in the literary tradition. I mean, that was a really inspired idea. I had never read this before. Had you ever? How did you come up with this concept of having the character take a moment and then analyze the previous chapters in that way?
Well, geez, thanks. Sort of the framing narrative technique that you refer to, so Meredith is 23, as you mentioned. All the exorcism or non-exorcism, or I should say possession or non-possession of her sister happened 15 years prior when she was 8. So I guess the narrative frame of the story is that Meredith is being interviewed by Rachel, who's a best-selling writer, who's going to write the book about her story. So, the framing technique for that, I actually was inspired by Stuart Onan's novel, The Speed Queen, which came out in the mid to late 90s, I believe.
I don't know it, but
yeah. In that novel, there's a woman who's on death row, and her name is Marjorie, so I purposely named my character after his Marjorie.
No kidding.
And she's being interviewed by Stephen King, and it's clearly Stephen King.
Clever.
In the book, he's not named, but it mentions the books that he's written. And if anyone who's read Stephen King or knows of Stephen King wouldn't realize, the person who's the writer that's interviewing Marjorie in The Speed Queen is Stephen King. So anyway, I started off sort of that framing technique, and and I knew that I wanted to I don't know, I had the want to sort of comment on the story. Like, I knew I was going to have some of the early sort of scenes sort of parallel The Exorcist a little bit.
Yeah.
And I wanted readers thinking, it's kind of creepy, but it's sort of like The Exorcist, or it's sort of like this movie. And I don't know, to sort of help undercut everything, or to help bring more ambiguity, or the idea of what the heck is really going on here.
Yeah.
Is to have, a narrator or somebody come into the book and actually say, hey, look at this. This is just like this movie, or this is just like this. So I think that helps to build the quite, hopefully, palpable sense of, man, is this real, or is this fake? There's, are they aware of this? And
it does make it
all
very unnerving.
Yeah,
because she'll stop. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, yeah, that was pretty much what I was going to say. That was sort of, the point behind those blog posts. So I got to, for me, it was the most fun I've ever had writing those blog posts, because not only did I get to, I feel like I served the story, I built the character, but I also got to sort of, build the ambiguity. But I also just got to geek out and talk about, all my favorite horror movies, and also talk about the stuff that I don't think that I think doesn't work in so many horror movies as well.
What all is on Mary? When we meet Meredith, she's pretty rich, probably because of maybe a lot of insurance money. Who knows? But she has a big collection of everything having to do with hauntings and exorcism. Mm-hmm. It's one of the ways that she's working her way through what happened in her family 15 years earlier. Do you recall all the things that are on her shelf? And I'm just curious if you've actually seen everything that she lists.
There's a couple of the nonfiction ones that she listed that I didn't read. There's a couple that sort of treat exorcism's possession as a real thing.
Yeah.
But pretty much all the all the fictional stuff I have read. All the movies that I listed I've seen. So I don't know. I think
you listed.
I think most of those movies are movies that horror fans, probably particularly horror fans who've grown up, or sort of my age or maybe even younger, would have seen a lot of those things.
It's kind of interesting because this concept of a survivor of a trauma, watching movies that recreate the trauma over and over. The odd thing is that the interviewer is a little bit taken aback by it.
Sure.
At first, she's like, "Well, why would you do that?" But in actuality, I know people who do exactly that. I know somebody who was deeply traumatized when their house was destroyed by a tornado, but they love tornado movies. Love them.
Yeah.
because there's something about carving a statue of the thing that happened and putting it over there, and then sort of walking around it. That I think maybe that's an oversimplified way to look at it, but it, I don't know. It's an empowering idea to be able to go, that over there is what happened, but I'm not there anymore. And also, those things are never realistic. So you can kind of enjoy the fact that that's, she's like, she says, all of these exorcism movies are not nearly as scary as what I went through.
Right.
And it is very scary.
I guess, I would say that sort of reveal comes not quite at the halfway point of the book, but it is a reveal. Sorry, spoiler alert to those who haven't read it. But
right.
A reveal that Mary is sort of the voice of the blogger. But
you're right. I forgot that was a secret. I apologize.
That's okay. There's many more other twists that happen that I think are more important. But I think that moment is an important realization of, this is Mary as an adult, because through most of the book we're getting Mary as the 8-year-old, or it's really Mary as the adult is giving you her memories of what happened when she was 8. So the idea that she's writing this blog or that she is watching these movies, that's important information about her as an adult, and you can certainly take it one of two ways. You could it could be a sign of a healthy person, as you just talked about, just confronting and overcoming their demons, but no pun intended. Or how thin is that line to being sort of obsessed with that, like unhealthily obsessed? I think the writer, her reaction is her reaction to when she finds out that Mary is just sort of continually submersing herself in all this sort of possession stories, despite everything that she had been through as a kid.
Yeah. I'm sorry, pardon me. It does come as a shock, and you have to wonder sort of how healthy she is. And besides, there are mysteries going through the rest of the book where you don't know. You considering that so much happened in the past, you managed to leave us a lot of questions about what actually went on back then. I think one of the scariest things for me reading it is when Marjorie, the teenager, starts to be whatever she is, to be affected in the way she is, to act out either with demon possession or whatever, the fear of losing and grieving over the healthy person that you lost is something that I identified with really strongly. We hear it from the perspective of the little sister, but we could just as well have been hearing it from the parents who are desperate to figure out what's going on with their previously healthy daughter and why is she acting in this way. Do you have a family? Is this something that you thought about?
I have I'm married and I have 2 kids, and actually my youngest of my 2 children, my daughter, was at the time of writing the novel was the same age as Mary. So I definitely looked to my daughter for a lot of inspiration. But no, I'm very very pleased to hear you talk like that about Marjorie, because I really didn't want to make her a monster. I wanted to try to treat this as realistic as possible. And even though throughout the whole book, and this isn't a spoiler, but I never come out and say to the readers, she is definitely possessed or she is suffering from some sort of mental breakdown. There's never a definitive answer presented. So, so with that in mind, I hope the reader could build one reader could build a case for she is possessed, one reader could build a case for she isn't possessed, and both could be right.
Wow.
But anyway, with that in mind, I really wanted to try to make, to me, the most horrifying stuff is the stuff that could be everyday, any-day stuff, like you talked about, like just watching your sister sort of disintegrate, and the overall disintegration of the family. And there's a couple of scenes, I won't necessarily detail, but to me, like, the most disturbing scenes are the ones where, maybe there probably isn't, or there doesn't have to be something supernatural going on for the worst parts of the book.
Absolutely. Because if she, if the person is just pretending or, just acting out, then there's a profound mental illness problem going on.
Right.
And that's super scary as well. Whereas if the problem is supernatural, there's always the possibility that you can exorcise it, which may also be going on. We don't necessarily land on all that. I mean, I've always felt that part of what's going on in the background of this and The Exorcist is a real fear on the part of adults, particularly on the part of men, a fear of puberty, a fear of sexuality on the part of young women, transitioning from being girls into being adult women, such that they start acting differently. They start acting alien from us, and we want to punish them and put them back in their place and change them back. Now, that breaks down because, of course, in all these stories, they end up being way more extreme than just somebody who no longer wants to hang out at the park with you. But I think there's something to that. I think there's this fear of women becoming independent creatures beyond us.
Oh, absolutely, especially with how The Exorcist and I would say like the standard possession tale is presented. I mean, absolutely. I think there's no doubt that there's almost more than any other sort of trope within the horror, there's a very uniquely male gaze aspect to this, where you are looking at this 14-year-old girl, and even like the saying, "The devil made me do it." Right? It's almost like you are giving yourself permission to have no responsibility for sort of the sexualized thoughts you're having for this 14-year-old girl, or whatever else happens there. I definitely wanted to react to that strongly in the novel and sort of address, for the patriarchy and how, Marjorie hopefully is presented as, or I should say, when the priests come in, I'm not giving away a secret. They don't make things any better.
Right.
They're making things worse.
But they were very well presented. I love the stuff about the books of exorcism, about the way the rules work. That was all very clever stuff. It both reminded me of The Exorcist and also was, again, clever sort of commentary on The Exorcist.
Right. Well, thanks.
Yeah. Hey, is it true that you were optioned for film for this?
It is true. Yes. Focus Features is currently working on getting it going. Allegiance Theater and Team Downey are the two production companies that are also working on it.
Do you get a chance to participate at all in the screenwriting of that?
Well, the screenplay is being worked on as we speak, so I don't have any official sort of say in the screenplay per se, but this is so very 2015 to say, but I've been chatting quite a bit with the two screenwriters on Twitter. Very nice guys, Benjamin Davis Collins and Luke Piotrowski. They have a movie called Stephanie coming out in 2016 that looks really good. I've read their script for that movie. And it's a very strange sort of horror movie, so I'm really excited to actually get to see it. But they're very enthusiastic about the book, and I know they're going to send me a draft at some point, and look for a little bit of unofficial input here and there. So no, I'm very excited. I can't wait to see what their take is on it. Someone who just wrote a book that, in one sense, is all about sort of influence, right? I sort of roll around all the different horror influences and how it influences story and what you think about. So I can't wait to see sort of what their take on it.
Absolutely, and you said that Mary, who's called Mary, all the way through. That's the same name, of course, as the main character in We Have Always Lived in the Castle.
Right.
Maricat, who's called Mary.
Yeah.
And is that an important book to you?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Almost to the point where give away like some parts of the book, but which is fine by me.
No, we don't have to. But so
yeah, no, I was
going
to say like if someone had read that book, you can kind of maybe foresee something that happens, but at the same time, I still think it doesn't sort of take any of the power away.
Not at
pretty
all.
much every character
not
in the book, pretty much every character in the book that that's a main character, to sort of embrace the whole idea of embrace the idea of all the different horror movies and stories that have come before. Every character is either their first or last name is from something else that I've read or another horror movie or another horror book. For the trade paperback version of the novel, my publisher is letting me add like a liner notes section. Where
great idea.
Yeah, where I talk about where like the character names came from. So I give up most of the secrets,
that's wonderful.
But not all of them.
When she talks, the voice that Mary brings on when she's in her blogger role, she talks about the burning of witches at the stake. Now I presume that she knows that witches were not burned at the stake in Massachusetts. It's funny. I had someone else like just I either send me a message or a Twitter message like, they weren't burned. So I addressed that in the liner notes. Yeah, I mean I think it's just sort of like a well, she has
exaggeration.
That wasn't intended to be bitchy at all. I swear to God. No.
No. It's just funny that I have had other people who did like take it as a point of, I guess, fact that she's wrong about that. Like, well, it's a blogger. It's just exaggeration.
Right. She has a very sort of wild, chatty, ultra enthusiastic style. And you said, in fact, that you had patterned it after somebody like a real reviewer that you enjoyed. Who was that again?
Yes. So Karen Brissett is the name of the blogger in the book, and the real Karen Brissett is one of the number one reviewers at the site Goodreads. Karen is, I've gotten to meet her. She's a great person. I think she's a wonderful reviewer and writer. She definitely has her own distinctive style. So I played with her style. I think I went a little bit over the top at some points just for fun. There's no way I was going to get her voice exactly perfectly. But yeah, no, she was named after the real blogger. And to me, I thought that was just kind of like another cool piece of mixing, like, the whole thing is about mixing reality and irreality and having a hard time figuring out which one is which. And I thought that, even if no one else knew about it, which people do now, because obviously I've mentioned it, in other places. But yeah, she's named after the real Karen Brissett.
I had no idea that it was based on a real name. That's amazing. I mean, it is I think the book is a very creative way to do a genre that people think they know pretty well and do a fresh take on it and it never feels mocking to me. It never feels like a waste. I found it to be both a good commentary but also a very chilling horror story in and of itself. So that really paid off. Well, I really appreciate you being on. Before I go, I wanted to ask you, I ask everybody about process. Do you outline or do you just go by the seat of your pants?
I've done both in the past. Like for my mystery novels, The Little Sleep and No Sleep to Wonderland, I outlined or I wrote plot summaries, like 10-page plot summaries first. Because with the mystery, I knew I had to know what the mystery was going to be. I'm not good enough. I'm not a good enough plotter to make a mystery plot up as I go. But with The Head Full of Ghosts, it was kind of by the seat of my pants. I kept a little black notebook. I knew there was going to be 3 sections.
Mm-hmm.
I knew the frame. We talked about the frame, right, with the writer and Mary. And then I knew there would be 3 sections. There would be what happened before the reality show came in. The second section would be the reality show. The third section would be after.
Right.
So, like, pretty early on, I knew it was going to be 2 sisters. I knew it was going to be those 3 sections, and then I just sort of, I kept notes as I went, but I didn't do like a plot outline or anything like that. So.
Interesting. That's really interesting. I mean, do you try to write every day, or does it come sometimes and not others?
Yeah. I mean, once I'm like, I guess, in a groove, I definitely try to write every day. I'm a full-time high school math teacher as well, so there's certain points in the year where it gets tough. Like. Yep. Actually, right. I mean, from September through February is, that's half a year. That's a busy time for me because I teach at a private school and they expect me to coach as well. So I still do some writing, but Once I get going, I aim for 500 words a day.
500 words a day.
And I give myself permission to not get it, some days, not beat myself up too much.
In the evening or early in the morning, or when do you fit it in?
Whenever I can, and more times than not, it's been the evening. But sometimes if I'm at school and if the schedule allows, and I have a free period or two, I'll do some work at school.
Wow, so you could. That's funny. I have the hardest time, breaking away, even if things are not very busy. Like I work a 9 to 5, and but I can't. Even if something's not very busy right now, it's much easier for me to read stupid headlines than to crack out a book and try to crank out 1,000 words. That somehow I can't get into that headspace. Although I think Stephen King would probably say that's just an excuse. You can get into any headspace anytime you
need. I mean, it does take practice. I mean, you can lose it. When I first started writing, I used to be able to do that all the time, to the point where my kids would be taking a test, and I would be ignoring them and just writing on my own thing. But this past year, I had another novel due this summer, so I was sort of forced into that mode again because I had to finish it, pretty quickly. Yeah. So there were some times this past winter where I took my son to a baseball clinic inside at Babson University, inside this big gym, and I was going to be there for an hour and a half. What the heck am I going to do for an hour and a half? So I had my laptop there, and there were basketballs and baseballs whizzing around, but I just put on headphones and and zoned in, and I was able to get some work done on 4 of those Sundays.
It's funny. I think I've heard of Charlotte Bronte doing that, where she would deal with kids in the house and deal with all that stuff, and then she could just kind of whip out her notebook and knock out some Jane Eyre, and then get back to whatever it was that she was doing. Well, okay, that's fascinating. I really appreciate that. It's always great to hear how somebody's making their art happen in the day-to-day world in which they live. So outstanding. Well, the new book is called A Head Full of Ghosts. It just came out this summer. It's been optioned for films by Focus Features and the Downey Group. And is it the Downey Team? No, Team Downey.
I think is the official name of the production company.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It sounds like a show on PBS. The Downey Group. The Team Downey.
Yeah, I mean, it's Robert Downey Jr.'s group, so you can just say
yes,
Robert Downey Jr.
And you can find Paul Tremblay at paultremblay.net. And I really appreciate you being on. Thank you so much for talking to us about A Head Full of Ghosts. I hope you have all the success in the world with it. It really kicks ass. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jason. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for all the kind words.
Absolutely. I'll talk to you soon. Bye, guys. Have a fantastic week.
All right.